All right, for part 2 of this lab, we're gonna take what you were working on yesterday with hypsometric tinting in Photoshop, and we're gonna learn how to do that same thing, but in Blender. So to start, what you're gonna need to do is make sure that you've got everything that's in this folder in Google Drive that Jeff linked to yesterday. Um, and it's all the same stuff, except it's got one additional item, the GRTE Hypso Imhoff. And what this is it's just a flat version of the hypsometric tint that you were using in Photoshop yesterday. And we're going to bring that into Blender today. So what you're going to want to make sure is that you have all of these files in a folder. And I'm assuming that you did that for yesterday's stuff. But you need to add this to the folder. So you can right click it and download it, or just download the whole folder if you don't have those handy. And once you've done that, I'm going to open the folder that I have with that in there. It's in Documents, Cart, and then, so here's the stuff that we did in the first part of the lab. I renamed that folder for ease of understanding. And then in here is all of those files, including this guy. And so what we're going to do now is let's open up that Hillshade template file that I had you guys make in the first section of lab. And we're going to use this over and over. But for now, let's open it up and let's re-save this as a new one. And let's put it into this same folder that's got all of that data in it. And we're going to call this one just grandteton.blender or something like that. I'm gonna give it a date. 0408 underscore. There we go. Cool. So let's save that. So now what we've done is we've basically just made a copy of that Hillshading template file into the new folder. So now let's plug in the nodes and the things that we know. So let's start with open, right from, so in case you don't have it set up like this already, remember we had this down here was the timeline view, and we just dragged this up so that, and then changed over here, changed it from timeline to the shader editor so that we can look at the node setup as well as the viewport in the same screen. All right, so from image texture, which is what's changing the displacement, right? We're going to bring in the Blender DEM for the Grand Tetons. And then remember, every time we have to change sRGB to linear. That's a standard operating procedure for Blender these days. And what we need to do now is we need to change the plane dimensions to make sure that it matches the dimensions of the Blender file. So here, I'm gonna pause for 1 second. All right, so yeah, we just need to change the dimensions of the plane to match the dimensions of the image. So I like to do it by dividing everything by like 1,000 so that we get nice, even, like single digit numbers. So this is the first dimension, so 3.243. And then we're going to change the y dimension to 3.758. Okay, cool. So now these guys match this. And then next we need to go back to the render properties. Oops, sorry, not that. The output, and change this to match. So 30, and this one you don't have to divide, it's the full thing, 3243, so that the output from Blender is the exact same dimensions as the input DEM. 3758. Okay, there's that. And then the last thing we need to do is change the orthographic scale for the camera. And remember, you need to multiply the larger of these numbers by 2. So in this case, it's going to be our plane dimensions. So 3.758, you can just copy that. And I like to do this on a Mac because it's easier. And I got to that by pressing Command Space. Multiply that by 2. 7.516. I don't know why that weird hat thing came up. Curious. And then let's select are, oops, I forgot. This is supposed to be called camera. I think we ran into that last section of the lab too. So in the camera, you can then go to the camera properties, change the orthographic scale, hit return, and then we can test it by clicking the camera view. Looks like it's framed perfectly. That sounds good. And then you can even go and check this guy to make sure that it's doing the right thing. And that's all we need to do. Now our Blender file is all set up. So let's hit save, and that's it for this section.